The crowd roared like thunder across the massive arena of Vextar Prime. Thousands of alien beings from dozens of worlds filled the curved metal seats that rose high into the artificial sky. Their voices mixed together in a sound that shook the ground beneath the fighting pit. In the center of it all stood a creature that had never lost a single battle in 7 long years. The arena workers called it the Silent One. It stood 12 feet tall on powerful legs that ended in clawed feet. 4 arms hung from its broad shoulders, each one strong enough to crush steel. Its body was covered in dark plates that looked like armor, but grew from its own skin. Along its spine, small lights flickered in patterns of blue and green. These lights were the only way anyone could tell what the creature might be thinking or feeling. The Silent One never made a sound. Not when it fought, not when it killed, not when the crowds cheered or when they threw things at it. The creature would enter the arena, destroy whatever opponent they put in front of it, and then return to its holding cell without ever opening its mouth. Some people said it could not speak. Others believed it chose not to. Either way, the silence made it more frightening than any roar or battle cry ever could. Commander Jake Sullivan woke up in a dark cell far beneath the arena. His head hurt, and his mouth tasted like metal. The last thing he remembered was his ship, the New Horizon, being pulled out of hyperspace by some kind of energy net. Then there had been boarding parties and weapons fire, and everything had gone black. Now he was here, wherever here was. Jake sat up slowly and looked around. The cell was small and made of the same gray metal as everything else in this place. A thin beam of light came from somewhere above him. He could hear voices talking in languages he did not know. Other prisoners, he guessed. Jake touched his uniform and found that most of his equipment was gone. No weapon, no communicator, no way to call for help. A door opened with a loud clang, and 3 alien guards walked in. They looked like giant insects with too many eyes and arms that bent in wrong directions. One of them spoke in broken English. "Human, wake up good. Boss wants see you now. You come." Jake stood up. He was a career military officer, and he knew when he had no choice but to follow orders. The guards led him through long hallways lined with more cells. In some of them he could see other prisoners. Most were aliens he had never seen before. A few looked like they might have been human once, but something had been done to them. Their eyes were empty, and they moved like machines instead of people. They brought him to a large room with windows that looked out over the arena floor. Jake could see the crowd and hear their noise even through the thick glass. Behind a desk sat another alien, this one wearing expensive clothes and jewelry that glittered in the light. Its skin was green and smooth like a snake, and it had 4 arms just like the creature Jake had seen in the arena. "Welcome to my establishment, human," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Arena Master Crixtall. You and your crew are now my property. Your ship was quite valuable, but I think you personally will be worth much more in the fighting pits." Jake kept his face calm even though his heart was beating fast. "My crew, where are they?" "Safe for now. Some will fight, others will serve. It depends on how entertaining they prove to be. You, however, have been chosen for something special. Tomorrow you will face our champion in single combat before the largest crowd of the season." Crixtall turned one of his screens around so Jake could see it. On the display was a recording of the Silent One fighting some kind of creature with too many teeth and claws. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds. The Silent One moved like water and struck like lightning. When it was over, the other creature was in pieces on the arena floor. "Beautiful, is it not?" Crixtall said. "The Silent One has won 427 consecutive battles. No opponent has lasted more than 5 minutes. Most die in the first 60 seconds. The crowds love it because they never know what they might see. Will it tear someone apart with its bare hands? Will it use one of the weapons we provide? Will it make the kill quick or slow? The only thing we know for certain is that it will never make a sound." Jake studied the recording. There was something wrong with the way the creature moved. It fought with incredible skill, but there was no passion in it. No anger or joy or fear. It moved like a machine that had been programmed to kill. "What is it?" "We do not know for certain. It came to us 7 years ago as part of a lot of salvage from the Zephyrian system. Most of the cargo was worthless, but this creature was special. Our scientists believe it was once a thinking being like you or me. Something happened to its mind. Now it exists only to fight and win." Crixtall stood up and walked to the window. Below them, workers were cleaning blood off the arena floor and setting up new obstacles for the next battle. The crowds grow bored easily. They need new challenges to keep them interested. Humans are still a novelty in this part of the galaxy. Small but clever, according to the reports. It should be interesting to see how long you last. The guards took Jake back to his cell. On the way, he passed other holding areas where he could see more prisoners. Some were in cages barely big enough for their bodies. Others were chained to walls. A few were connected to machines that hummed and clicked. Jake realized this was not just an arena. It was a factory that turned living beings into entertainment. In the cell next to his, Jake found another prisoner who could speak English. It was an alien that looked something like a cross between a human and a bird. Its name was Veltar, and it had been here for 3 months. The Silent One was not always like this, Veltar told him through the bars between their cells. "The old prisoners say it used to be different, before the machines, before the conditioning. They say it was a scholar or a teacher or something like that, peaceful people. But when its world was destroyed and its people killed, something broke inside its mind." "What kind of conditioning?" Jake asked. "Neural implants. They put metal in your brain to control how you think and feel. Most prisoners get simple ones that just make you follow orders. But the Silent One has something special. Something that keeps it in a state of constant rage and pain. The only way it can find peace is by fighting and winning. So it fights and wins, and then the cycle starts over again." Jake looked through his small window at the arena floor. Tomorrow, he would be down there facing a creature that had been tortured into becoming the perfect killer. A being that had once been peaceful and intelligent, but was now trapped in an endless nightmare of violence. He thought about his daughter Amy back on Earth and wondered if he would ever see her again. "Has anyone ever tried to help it?" Jake asked. Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Help the Silent One. You might as well try to help a star or a black hole. It is beyond help, human. It is beyond everything except death. And death will not come for it until someone stronger comes along. In 7 years, no one has been stronger." The lights in the cell block went dim. Around him, Jake could hear the sounds of other prisoners settling in for the night. Some cried, others prayed to gods he had never heard of. A few made plans they would never be able to carry out. Jake closed his eyes and tried to think of a way out of this place, not just for himself, but for all of them, even for the Silent One, if such a thing was possible. The morning came too soon. Jake heard the sound of metal doors opening and closing throughout the cell block as guards collected prisoners for the day's entertainment. Some would fight. Others would be used in different ways. All of them would suffer for the pleasure of the crowd. When the guards came for Jake, they gave him a set of basic armor that looked like it had been used by many fighters before him. The metal was dented and stained with things he did not want to think about. They also gave him a choice of weapons from a rack that held swords and axes and other tools designed for killing. Jake picked a simple metal staff. It was not the best weapon for fighting, but it felt right in his hands. Arena Master Krixtal was waiting for them in the preparation chamber. He looked excited in the way that people do when they are about to watch something terrible happen to someone else. Today will be special, human. The largest crowd of the season has come to see you face the Silent One. I have told them that your species might actually provide a challenge. Do not disappoint me by dying too quickly. Through the thick walls, Jake could hear the crowd above them. They were already cheering for blood that had not been spilled yet. The sound made his stomach turn. These people had gathered from across the galaxy to watch him die, and they could not wait for it to begin. "Why are you doing this?" Jake asked. "You have weapons and ships and technology. You could explore the galaxy or build great cities or create art. Instead, you capture people and force them to kill each other for entertainment." Krixtal looked at him like he had asked why water was wet. "Because it is profitable, human. Because people will pay good money to see violence they do not have to participate in themselves. Because fear and death and suffering are the oldest forms of entertainment in the universe. Your species will learn this soon enough." The guards led Jake to a platform that would lift him up into the arena. He could see the Silent One waiting on a similar platform on the other side of the fighting pit. Even from this distance, the creature looked enormous. Its 4 arms hung loose at its sides, and the lights along its spine flickered in slow patterns of blue and white. It stared straight ahead without moving, like a statue waiting to come to life. "One more thing, human," Krixtal said. "The crowds expect a show. If you simply give up or try to surrender, I will have your entire crew fed too, the pit beasts one by one while you watch. Fight well, or watch your friends die badly." The platform began to rise. Jake felt his stomach drop as he was lifted up through a hole in the arena floor. The sound of the crowd hit him like a physical force. Thousands of voices screaming and cheering and calling for blood. The arena was even bigger than it had looked from the windows above. The walls rose up on all sides like the inside of a massive bowl, and every seat was filled with aliens who wanted to see him die. Jake stepped off the platform and onto the sand-covered floor of the arena. The sand was dark, and Jake realized it was probably stained with the blood of everyone who had died here before him. On the other side of the fighting pit, the Silent One stepped down from its own platform. Up close, the creature was even more frightening. Its movements were smooth and controlled, but Jake could see the tension in its body like a weapon ready to strike. The crowd grew louder as both fighters moved toward the center of the arena. Jake could see aliens placing bets on how long he would last. Most seemed to think it would be over in seconds. A few optimistic souls had wagered that he might survive a full minute. Jake reached the center of the arena and stopped. The Silent One was now only 20 feet away from him. Its eyes were black and empty, but the lights along its spine were flashing faster now. Jake could see the neural implants that Veltar had talked about. Small metal devices attached to the creature's skull and neck that pulsed with their own light in rhythm with its heartbeat. The arena master's voice boomed over the crowd from speakers hidden around the arena. "Citizens of the galaxy, today we present a special match. From the distant world of Earth, we bring you a human warrior who believes his species can challenge our champion. Let us see if this small creature can provide better sport than the last dozen challengers who barely lasted 30 seconds each. Jake looked around at the crowd and then back at the silent one. The creature had not moved since reaching the center of the arena. It simply stood there waiting for the signal to begin fighting. Jake made a decision that surprised everyone in the arena, including himself. He sat down. Jake placed his staff on the ground beside him and sat cross-legged on the sand. He removed his helmet and set it down carefully. Then he looked up at the silent one and began to speak. My name is Jake Sullivan. I come from a planet called Earth. It is a blue world with white clouds and green continents. We have oceans full of life and mountains that touch the sky. I have a daughter there named Amy. She is 8 years old and she loves to read books about space adventures. She dreams of traveling to other worlds and meeting new people. The silent one tilted its head slightly. It was the first movement the creature had made since the match began. The crowd was starting to murmur in confusion. This was not what they had come to see. Jake continued talking. Amy asks me questions about the stars every night before she goes to sleep. She wants to know if there are other children on other worlds who look up at the same stars and wonder about us. I always tell her yes. I tell her that somewhere out, there are beings who love their children just as much as we love ours. The lights along the silent one's spine began to flicker in different patterns. Instead of the steady blue and white, there were now touches of green and yellow, colors that had not been seen there in 7 years. The creature took a step closer to Jake, but its movements were different now, less predatory, more curious. I do not know what happened to your world or your people, Jake said, but I know what it feels like to lose someone you love. I know what it feels like to be angry and hurt and alone. I know what it feels like to want revenge against the people who took everything away from you. The crowd was growing restless. They had come to see a fight, and instead, they were watching a human have a conversation with their champion. Some began to boo and throw objects into the arena. Others shouted for the match to begin properly. Jake ignored them all. He kept his eyes on the silent one and continued to speak. My people have a saying. We say that the best way to honor the dead is to live well, to remember them with love instead of hate, to build something beautiful in their memory instead of destroying everything around us in our anger. The silent one moved closer. Now it was only 10 feet away from Jake. The creature knelt down slowly until it was at eye level with the human. For the first time in 7 years, it looked directly into the eyes of another living being without the intention of killing them. I can see the pain in you, Jake said softly. I can see the intelligence that they tried to bury under all that anger and conditioning. You are still in there, aren't you? You are still the person you used to be before they broke you and turned you into this. The lights along the silent one's spine were now flashing in rapid bursts of many colors. The neural implants on its head were sparking and smoking as the creature's own mind began to fight against the programming that had controlled it for so long. And then, for the first time in 7 years, the silent one opened its mouth and made a sound. It was not a roar or a scream or a battle cry. It was something much more surprising and much more human. It was the sound of someone crying. The sound that came from the silent one was like nothing the arena had ever heard before. It was a deep, broken noise that seemed to come from the very center of the creature's soul. The crowd fell silent for the first time in 7 years. Even the arena guards stopped moving and stared in shock at their champion. Jake remained sitting on the sand, never taking his eyes off the creature in front of him. Tears were rolling down the silent one's face, leaving wet tracks in the dust and grime that covered its skin. The lights along its spine were flashing wildly now, cycling through colors that no one had ever seen from the creature before. "I know you remember," Jake said quietly. "I know you remember who you were before. They did this to you. What was your name? What did you do before the fighting? Did you have a family?" The Silent One tried to speak, but only more crying sounds came out. Its vocal cords had not been used for anything except screaming in pain during the neural conditioning sessions. The words were there, but the body had forgotten how to make them. In the viewing box high above the arena floor, Arena Master Krixtal was screaming orders at his technicians. "Activate the pain protocols. Force it back into combat mode. This is not acceptable." The crowd paid to see a fight. Jake heard the sound of machinery starting up somewhere beneath the arena floor. The neural implants on the Silent One's head began to glow brighter and emit a high-pitched whining sound. The creature's body went rigid, and its eyes rolled back as electricity coursed through its brain. "No," Jake said, jumping to his feet. "Stop hurting it." The Silent One fell forward, onto its hands and knees, as the pain protocols increased in intensity. The lights along its spine turned a violent red color and began flashing in rapid bursts. The creature was fighting against the conditioning, but the machines were stronger. Jake could see it happening in real time as the intelligence and personality faded from its eyes and the killing instinct took over again. Jake did something that no one in the arena expected. He stepped between the Silent One and the hidden weapon systems that were designed to punish disobedient fighters. Energy blasts meant to force the creature back into combat mode struck Jake instead. The armor he wore was basic and offered little protection. The energy weapons burned through the metal plates and into his skin. "Jake Sullivan, Commander, Earth Defense Force, serial number 77492, Jake said through gritted teeth as another energy blast hit him in the shoulder. "I am a prisoner of war, and I demand to be treated according to galactic law." The crowd was on its feet now, screaming in confusion and excitement. This was not the show they had expected, but it was certainly entertaining. Some were cheering for Jake. Others were demanding that the guards kill him immediately. Most were simply confused about what they were watching. Jake fell to one knee as more energy blasts struck him, but he did not move out of the way. Behind him, the Silent One was still fighting against the neural conditioning. The creature's own mind was at war with the machines that had controlled it for 7 years. "Your name," Jake called over his shoulder. "Tell me your name." The Silent One looked up at Jake with eyes that were flickering between empty black and something that looked almost human. Its mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. When it finally spoke, the voice was rough and broken, but the words were clear. "Morthak," it said. "My name was Morthak." The arena fell completely silent. Even Arena Master Krixtal stopped screaming orders at his technicians. The Silent One had spoken its own name for the first time in 7 years. The neural conditioning was breaking down, and the real person underneath was fighting to get out. "Morthak," Jake repeated. "That's a good name. What did you do before this place, Morthak?" "I was a teacher," Morthak said, and its voice was getting stronger with each word. "I taught young ones about the stars and the worlds beyond our home. I told them stories about distant peoples and distant places. I wanted them to dream of peace between all the thinking beings in the galaxy." More energy blasts rained down from the arena's weapon systems, but Jake stayed where he was, protecting Morthak from the worst of the punishment protocols. His armor was completely destroyed now, and his skin was burned in dozens of places, but he did not move. "What happened to your world?" Jake asked. "The Draconic Empire came," Morthak said. The creature's voice was filled with pain that had nothing to do with the energy weapons. "They said we were in their way. They said our system had resources they needed. We tried to negotiate. We offered to share what we had. We offered to relocate to another world. They did not care about our offers." Jake felt another energy blast. Burn through his back, but he forced himself to keep talking. "How many of your people survived?" "3," Morthak said. "Only 3 out of 40 million. They kept us alive to sell as slaves. The others died quickly, but I was strong, so they used me for this. They put the machines in my head to make me forget who I was, to make me forget my students and my family and my world. But I never forgot completely. The memories were always there, buried under the pain and the anger." Arena Master Crixtal was screaming into his communicator now, calling for additional security forces. The situation was spiraling out of control, and he could not afford to lose his most valuable asset. The Silent One was supposed to be an unthinking killing machine, not a person with memories and feelings. Jake looked up at the viewing box and could see Crixtal gesturing wildly at his guards. More weapon systems were coming online around the arena, and Jake realized that they were about to increase the punishment protocols to lethal levels. They would rather kill both fighters than allow this disruption to continue. "Morthak," Jake said urgently, "can you fight? Not as their weapon, but as yourself. Can you choose to fight back against the people who did this to you?" Morthak slowly stood up. The creature was still connected to the neural implants, but its own willpower was stronger now than the machines that tried to control it. The lights along its spine were no longer red, but had returned to the blue and green patterns from before the conditioning began. "Yes," Morthak said, "I can choose. For the first time in 7 years, I can choose." The arena's weapon systems reached full power and began firing energy blasts that could cut through starship armor. But instead of striking 2 helpless targets, they now faced something they had never encountered before. They faced a human who refused to give up and an alien who had remembered how to be free. Jake rolled to one side and grabbed his staff from the sand. Morthak moved with fluid grace to the other side, using its 4 arms to deflect energy blasts away from both of them. The creature was no longer fighting like a programmed machine. It was fighting like a teacher protecting his students. "Can you get us out of here?" Jake asked as they took cover behind one of the arena's obstacles. "I know this place better than anyone," Morthak said. 7 years of fighting in every corner of this arena. But first, we must stop the machines. As long as the neural network is active, every enslaved fighter in this complex will remain under their control. Jake looked around the arena and saw dozens of weapon systems tracking their movements. Above them, the crowd was in chaos as some cheered and others demanded refunds. In the viewing box, Arena Master Crixtal was red with rage and screaming orders that no one seemed to be following. "Then let's stop the machines," Jake said. "Let's give everyone here a chance to choose." Morthak smiled for the first time in 7 years. It was a terrifying expression on a creature designed for killing, but it was also the most human thing Jake had ever seen. "Yes," Morthak said, "let us choose freedom." Jake and Morthak moved together across the arena floor like partners in a deadly dance. The creature's 4 arms allowed it to deflect multiple energy blasts at once, while Jake used his staff to vault over obstacles and reach weapon systems that Morthak could not access. They were no longer prisoner and champion. They were allies fighting for their freedom. "The control center is beneath the arena," Morthak explained as they destroyed another automated turret. I have seen the technicians come and go through maintenance tunnels during my years here. If we can reach the neural network hub, we can disable the conditioning systems for every prisoner in this complex. Jake ducked under another energy blast and noticed something that made his heart race with hope. In the distance, beyond the arena walls, he could see explosions lighting up the sky. Someone was attacking the orbital platforms around Vextar Prime. Someone was fighting the crime syndicate's forces in space. "My crew," Jake said. "They must have escaped and called for help." Through the chaos of the arena battle, Jake could hear the sound of his communicator crackling to life. Somehow, the signal dampeners had been disrupted by all the weapon fire. The voice that came through was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. "Commander Sullivan, this is Lieutenant Lisa Park, aboard the rescue ship Liberty. We are engaging. Enemy forces in orbit and preparing to extract you and any other prisoners. Can you reach a safe extraction point?" Jake grabbed his communicator with one hand while using his staff to block debris with the other. "Lisa, thank God. I'm in the main arena with an ally. We're trying to reach the control center to free the other prisoners. How many ships do you have?" "Just 3, sir. The New Horizon, the Liberty, and the science vessel Discovery. We're heavily outgunned, but we're not leaving without you and the crew." Morthak was listening to the conversation while tearing apart another weapon system with its bare hands. "3 ships will not be enough," the creature said. "This complex has orbital defense platforms and a fleet of warships. Your people will be destroyed unless we can level the playing field," Jake thought quickly. "The other prisoners. How many fighters are being held here?" "Hundreds," Morthak replied. "Beings from dozens of worlds, all conditioned to fight without question. If we could free them and turn off their neural implants, they would become allies instead of slaves." Jake spoke into his communicator again. "Lisa, we need you to keep the orbital forces busy for 20 minutes. We're going to try to start a prison breakdown here. If we can free the other captives, they can help us take this place apart from the inside." "Understood, Commander. We'll do what we can. Liberty out." Morthak led Jake to a damaged section of the arena wall where an energy blast had blown a hole large enough for them to crawl through. Behind the wall was a maze of maintenance tunnels that honeycombed the underground levels of the complex. The creature moved through the passages with the confidence of someone who had memorized every inch of their prison. "Tell me about your world," Jake said as they climbed down a metal ladder toward the lower levels. "What was it like before the Empire destroyed it?" Morthak was quiet for a moment before answering. "Beautiful. We had crystal cities that grew from the ground like living things, gardens that floated in the sky, libraries filled with the wisdom of 1,000,000 years. We were a peaceful people who believed that knowledge was the greatest treasure in the universe." They reached the bottom of the ladder and found themselves in a corridor lined with doors. Behind each door, Jake could hear the sounds of imprisoned beings. Some were crying, others were screaming, a few were completely silent in a way that was more frightening than any noise. "My students would ask me if there were evil beings in the galaxy," Morthak continued. "I would tell them that there was no such thing as evil, only fear and ignorance and pain. I believed that any conflict could be resolved through understanding and communication. I was wrong." Jake stopped walking and turned to face Morthak. "You weren't wrong. You're here right now, fighting to free people you don't even know, because a human sat down and talked to you instead of trying to kill you. Your way of thinking saved both of us." Morthak's lights flickered in what Jake was beginning to recognize as the creature's version of a smile. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your words, Jake Sullivan of Earth. Perhaps my students were right to believe in peace." They reached a heavy metal door marked with warning symbols in several alien languages. Morthak placed one hand on a scanner beside the door, and there was a moment of tension as the security system decided whether to recognize the creature as an authorized arena fighter or an escaped prisoner. After several seconds, the door slid open with a soft hiss. The room beyond was filled with banks of computers and monitoring equipment. Dozens of screens showed different areas of the complex, including holding cells, fighting pits, and conditioning chambers. In the center of it all was a massive cylindrical device that hummed with power and pulsed with the same rhythm as the neural implants. The neural network hub, Morthak said. Every enslaved mind in this complex is connected to this machine. It controls their thoughts, their emotions, their memories. It is the source of all the suffering here. Jake studied the device and the computer systems around it. Can you shut it down? I can try. But the security protocols are complex, and I am not a technician. If I make a mistake, the system might send a fatal shock through every connected implant. We could kill hundreds of prisoners instead of freeing them. Jake looked at the screens showing the various holding areas. He could see aliens of every shape and size locked in cells or chained to walls or connected to machines. All of them had the same empty look in their eyes that Morthak had possessed when they first met. All of them had been broken and rebuilt as weapons for the entertainment of others. What if we don't shut it down? Jake said. What if we reprogram it instead? Change the conditioning from obedience to rebellion. Make every enslaved fighter in this place remember who they used to be and what was done to them. Morthak's lights flashed rapidly as the creature considered this idea. Possible, but dangerous. The shock of recovering suppressed memories all at once could drive some of them insane, and the guards will not simply stand by while we free their property. As if summoned by Morthak's words, the sound of running feet echoed through the corridors outside the control room. Arena Master Krixtal's voice boomed over the facility's communication system. Security teams to the neural hub immediately. The prisoners are attempting to sabotage our operations. Use lethal force. The human and the defective champion are to be terminated on sight. Jake moved to the door controls and sealed the entrance to the control room. How long do we have before they break through? Not long. The door will hold for perhaps 5 minutes against their cutting tools. Jake turned back to the neural network hub and began studying the control interface. The symbols were alien, but the basic principles of computer operation were universal. Input, processing, output, command structures, and data pathways. It was like every other computer system he had ever worked with, just written in a different language. Morthak, I need you to help me understand these controls. You've been connected to this system for 7 years. You know how it works better than anyone. Morthak moved to the console and began pointing out different sections of the interface. This controls the intensity of the conditioning signals. This monitors the status of individual implants. This section manages the memory suppression protocols. The sound of cutting tools began to echo through the door behind them. Sparks flew as the guards worked to burn through the metal. Jake estimated they had maybe 3 minutes before the entrance was breached. Here, Jake said, pointing to a section of the control system. If we reverse the memory suppression and increase the intensity of the personal identity signals, we should be able to break the conditioning on everyone at once. The shock could kill them, Morthak warned. The alternative is leaving them as slaves forever, Jake replied. I think they would choose the risk. Morthak nodded and began working alongside Jake to reprogram the neural network. The creature's 4 arms allowed it to operate multiple controls simultaneously, while Jake focused on the central command pathways. Together, they began to rewrite the code that had enslaved hundreds of thinking beings. On the monitors around them, Jake could see the first signs that their work was having an effect. In the holding cells, prisoners were beginning to stir and look around with confusion instead of empty acceptance. In the conditioning chambers, enslaved fighters were fighting against their restraints as memories of their former lives began to surface. "It's working," Jake said. "They're remembering." The cutting tools broke through the door, and armed guards began pouring into the control room. Morthak moved to intercept them while Jake frantically worked to complete the reprogramming sequence. The creature fought with a fury that came not from neural conditioning, but from righteous anger at years of slavery and torture. "Almost finished," Jake called out as he entered the final commands. "Just a few more seconds." On the monitors, Jake could see prisoners throughout the complex breaking free from their cells and restraints. The neural network hub exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The massive cylindrical device that had controlled hundreds of enslaved minds for years collapsed in on itself with a sound like thunder. Throughout the complex, neural implants sparked and died as their connection to the control system was severed forever. Jake was thrown backward by the explosion and landed hard against the wall. His ears were ringing, and his vision was blurred, but he could see Morthak standing over the wreckage of the machine that had tormented them both. The creature's lights were flashing in patterns of pure joy, colors that Jake had never seen before. "It is done," Morthak said. "Every enslaved mind in this complex is now free to choose." The guards who had broken into the control room were backing toward the door in confusion and fear. On their communication devices, they could hear reports of prisoner uprisings throughout the facility. Beings who had been docile slaves just minutes before were now fighting with the fury of people who remembered what had been stolen from them. Arena Master Krixtal's voice came over the facility's speakers, but it was no longer confident and commanding. There was panic in his words now. "All units fall back to the primary defense points. Initiate emergency lockdown procedures. Contact the orbital platforms and request immediate military support." Jake struggled to his feet and grabbed his communicator. "Lisa, this is Jake. The prisoners are free and fighting back. What's your status up there?" "We've got problems, Commander." Lisa's voice crackled through the static. "More Syndicate ships are arriving and we're taking heavy damage. The New Horizons engines are down and the Discovery lost main power. We can hold them for maybe 10 more minutes, but then we'll have to retreat." Jake looked at the monitoring screens that were still functioning. Throughout the complex, he could see scenes of chaos as freed prisoners battled their former captors. But the Syndicate forces were regrouping and the automatic defense systems were coming online. Without help from orbit, the rebellion would be crushed within the hour. "Morthak, is there any way to contact the other freed prisoners? Some kind of communication system we can use to coordinate the fighting?" "The arena's announcement system," Morthak replied. "It reaches every section of the complex, but Arena Master Krixtal will try to stop us from using it." They fought their way through corridors filled with smoke and running figures. Some were guards trying to reach defensive positions. Others were freed prisoners seeking revenge against their captors. Jake saw beings he had never imagined before, creatures from dozens of worlds all united in their hatred of the Syndicate that had enslaved them. In one corridor, they found Veltar leading a group of newly freed prisoners in an assault on a guard checkpoint. The bird-like alien that Jake had spoken to in the cells was no longer timid and broken. He fought with the skill of a trained warrior and the fury of someone who had endured months of captivity. "Jake," Veltar called out when he saw them approaching. "The control systems for this section are down, but the main defense grid is still active. They have weapons platforms that can destroy us, all if we cannot reach the command center." "Where is the command center?" Jake asked. "Top level of the arena structure. Heavily defended. It will take all of us working together to break through their defenses." Morthak stepped forward and placed one of its hands on Veltar's shoulder. "Gather every freed prisoner you can find. Tell them to meet us at the main elevator shaft in 10 minutes. We will finish this together." As Veltar ran off to spread the word, Jake turned to Morthak with a question that had been bothering him since they left the neural hub. "How many of your people were in the Draconic Empire's invasion fleet?" "Millions," Morthak replied. "They used their massive ships and overwhelming numbers to crush any resistance. Why do you ask?" "Because I'm wondering how they would react if they suddenly found themselves facing millions of angry slaves who remembered exactly what the Empire had done to them." Morthak's lights flickered as the creature understood what Jake was suggesting. "You think there are other complexes like this one? Other places where the Empire's victims are held as slaves?" "I think this place is just the beginning," Jake said. "And if we can get word out about what happened here, if we can show the galaxy that enslaved people can break free and fight back, it might start something much bigger than just a prison break." They reached the main elevator shaft to find hundreds of freed prisoners waiting for them. Jake had never seen so many different species in one place before. There were insectoids and reptilians and beings made of what looked like living crystal. There were creatures with too many arms and others with no arms at all. All of them had one thing in common. They had been broken and enslaved, and now they were free and angry. But as they prepared to assault the command center, Jake realized they had a problem. The elevator system had been shut down, and the stairwells were too narrow for their large group. They needed another way to reach the top of the arena structure. "The arena floor," Morthak said suddenly. "There are anti-grav platforms used to lift fighters and equipment during the shows. If we can reach the arena, we can use those platforms to carry our forces directly to the command center." They fought their way back to the main arena, which was now empty, except for the bodies of guards who had tried to stop the earlier prisoner uprising. The viewing boxes that had been filled with cheering crowds were now dark and abandoned. Even the bloodthirsty spectators had fled when the entertainment became too real. Jake looked up at the command center high above them and could see Arena Master Crixtal and his remaining guards preparing for a final stand. The alien crime boss was screaming orders and gesturing wildly at weapon systems that were being brought online throughout the arena. "Attention, escaped prisoners," Crixtal's amplified voice boomed across the arena. "You have 10 seconds to surrender before I activate the arena's sterilization protocol. This system will flood every level of the complex with poison gas. You will all die slowly and painfully unless you return to your cells immediately." The freed prisoners looked at each other with uncertainty. They had just escaped from slavery and now they were being threatened with death. Some began to back toward the exits, ready to flee rather than face the poison gas. Jake stepped forward onto one of the anti-grav platforms and activated the arena's communication system. His voice carried to every corner of the complex as he spoke to hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds. "My name is Jake Sullivan, and I am from a planet called Earth. 3 days ago, I was captured by the same people who enslaved all of you. Today we have a choice. We can run and hide and hope that someone else will save us, or we can stand together and fight for our freedom." The freed prisoners stopped moving toward the exits and turned to listen. Jake could see hope beginning. to replace fear in their eyes. "I know you are afraid," Jake continued. "I know you have suffered more than anyone should ever have to suffer. But you are not alone anymore. You have each other. You have allies in orbit who are fighting to help us. And you have something that your captors can never take away from you. You have the right to choose your own fate." Arena Master Krixtal was screaming at his technicians to activate the poison gas systems, but the freed prisoners in the control center were now fighting the guards and preventing them from reaching the environmental controls. Jake looked up at Morthak, who was standing beside him on the platform. "Tell them about your world. Tell them about your people and what the Empire took from you." Morthak stepped forward, and its voice carried across the arena with a power that Jake had never heard before. "I was a teacher on a world called Zephyr Prime. We were a peaceful people who believed in the value of every thinking being in the universe. The Draconic Empire destroyed my world because we refused to become their slaves. They killed 40 million of my people and sold the survivors to places like this." The creature's voice grew stronger as it continued. "For 7 years, I forgot who I was. I forgot my students and my family and my purpose. I became a weapon for the entertainment of others. But today, a human named Jake Sullivan reminded me that I still have the power to choose. He showed me that compassion is stronger than conditioning, and that hope is stronger than despair." Morthak turned to face Jake, and its next words were spoken not to the crowd, but directly to the human who had saved its soul. "Please, my friend, help me save them all. Help me remember who we were before they made us forget. Help me show the galaxy that enslaved people can break their chains and fight for justice." Jake felt tears running down his face as he realized that the silent beast of the arena was now pleading not for mercy, but for the chance to help others find their freedom. This was the moment the title had promised. The deadliest creature in the galaxy was asking a human for help in saving everyone they could reach. "Together," Jake said, and his voice carried to every corner of the complex. "We finish this together." The anti-grav platforms rose toward the command center, carrying hundreds of freed prisoners from dozens of worlds. In orbit above them, Lisa, Park's small fleet, was joined by ships from other human colonies who had heard the distress call. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since their capture, Jake believed they could win.